not bad right now, Matt and Tam.
Thanks, Matt. Once again, we have several results on a lot of races, including some history-making ones on 6abc.com.
Sending you back now to ABC News.
Your voice, your vote. The race for the White House. Election night 2024 continues. Here again, David Muir.
Did they just say election night 2024? Because I think we need to update that announce to election morning, 5:30 here in the East. The whole team is here, and we're glad you're with us at home. I want to get right back over to Rick Klein at the big board, our political director, Washington bureau chief. And Rick, obviously, we've been saying this throughout the night for our viewers. We're waiting for the decision desk to do the final math here, just to be absolutely sure of where we all see that this is headed. Can you take us through? You have Wisconsin up there right now.
Yeah.
What are we looking at in Wisconsin?
Yeah, well, Wisconsin would be the clinching state for Donald Trump. So would Michigan, so would Arizona, so would Nevada, so would a combination of Alaska and the one congressional district in Maine, or an upset in New Hampshire. But the place that we are focused in on at this hour, this very early morning hour, is Wisconsin. We're now down to a vanishingly small amount of the vote left, probably less than 9,000 votes in Milwaukee. The system is estimating 99% of the vote is in, but the margin is down.
Stand by, Rick. We're just going to pause here to project. And we can project that Donald Trump has won the state of Wisconsin, the key battleground state of Wisconsin. It's 10 electoral votes. I believe that then makes Donald Trump now, ABC News can project that the former President Donald Trump will be the 47th president of the United States. That takes him to 276 electoral votes. There are still states on the map to be counted. Not since Grover Cleveland has someone served non-consecutive presidential terms. Jon Karl was talking about that earlier in the night. It's now become a reality. Again, the breaking news at 5:31 here in the East, former President Donald Trump, ABC News now projecting, will be the next president of the United States. And part of the path that he built along the electoral map is this blue wall that the Democrats were convinced would be Kamala Harris's best route to the presidency. Donald Trump winning Pennsylvania, and now he has won Wisconsin. He won North Carolina and Georgia, and a number of other battlegrounds are still being counted where he holds leads. Significant, even though we've been reporting on this and the analysis has been excellent and careful from the whole team here all night long, but we are here, and Mary Bruce, Jon Karl, your first reaction here to the official news. Donald Trump is headed back to the White House.
Look, we said it as we had approached this point. This is just an unbelievable comeback, the greatest political comeback in the history of the United States. And this is a victory unlike his 2016 victory, certainly unlike his loss in 2020. Donald Trump not only wins the Electoral College, but it looks like he has a very good chance of winning the popular vote. He comes back to the White House, rising like a phoenix from the ashes after having left in disgrace, twice impeached, facing multiple indictments, convictions here in New York, and he captures the White House in a way that he didn't even do the first time, and with the strength of a significant majority in the United States Senate as well.
Mary Bruce, you cover the White House, and you know part of the calculation for so long, President Biden believed that he was best positioned to keep Donald Trump from returning to the White House, ultimately deciding after that debate performance in June that he needed to step aside. He quickly endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris. There's going to be a lot of discussion, obviously, in so many Democratic circles right there in the White House about the timing, the decision, when the decision was made, the fact that they didn't do a primary or some version of a primary, if there was a better way for Democrats to be better prepared to sort of take on Donald Trump, and those questions now begin.
107-day sprint. That was what Kamala Harris had and what she tried to pull off here. It was the shortest campaign in modern American political history. The party coalesced around her quickly. They thought and felt extremely confident, cautiously confident, but confident nonetheless, many hours ago when this day began yesterday morning, that they were going to be able to pull this off because they felt that they had built such a broad coalition, that she had reached out to all of those key demographics, that she was going to expand beyond her base in a way that they argued Donald Trump simply could not do. And yet we have seen really the opposite, that she wasn't able to turn out her own base in some ways in those big urban centers in the way that she needed. And despite painting such a dire picture of a second Trump term, ultimately, it was that question of whether you are better off now than you were 4 years ago that Donald Trump hammered throughout this campaign that seems to have resonated most with voters.
We're going to pause here so that the rest of the network can join us for breaking news coverage here of our projection and yet another state to call. Let's pause here for a moment.
This is an ABC News election update. Now reporting, David Muir.
Good morning. It's now 5:35 here in the East. We are allowing all of our stations across the country to join us now with the breaking news. We are projecting at this hour the 47th president of the United States, Donald Trump, will be elected to return to the White House. Not consecutive terms. We mentioned a moment ago as we were on our air with our coverage, the first since Grover Cleveland to serve non-consecutive presidential terms. Donald Trump returning to the White House as the 47th president of the United States. He does so with Wisconsin now in his win column. Of course, there are a number of states on the map that still look pretty favorable for Donald Trump tonight, but Wisconsin was the state that put him over the map, getting him to 279 at this point to Kamala Harris's 219 electoral votes. I'm going to quickly rejoin the team here so that the entire network can hear a little bit of what we're our early analysis. And John, as you and I have been saying all night long, this is an extraordinary political comeback. You say we've never seen anything like it.
Look, the greatest political comeback in American history and a victory unlike any that Donald Trump has ever seen, because not only does he win what appears to be a decisive electoral college victory, it seems like he is on the verge of winning the popular vote as well. So he comes back to the White House. Remarkable when you consider the way he left the White House in January of 2021. He comes back to the White House with a mandate. The majority of the American people, it seems, ultimately, when all the votes are counted, will be saying they want Donald Trump to be president. Now, that said, David, he faces the challenge of uniting a deeply divided country. And the nearly half the country that voted against him, many of them see him as not somebody that they simply didn't want in the White House, but see him as a threat. So now the question is, how does he convince those people that he can be a president for all Americans, including those who didn't vote for him?
One of the central questions moving forward, you're absolutely right, John. One of the questions in looking back, and there will be many of them, come for this White House. Mary Bruce, you've covered the White House now, the Biden-Harris administration. A lot of people are going to be looking to President Biden, his decision to bow out after that horrible debate performance in June, whether or not that was a decision that should have been made earlier, that would have perhaps given the Democratic Party more time to do some sort of primary. He did, or would have given Kamala Harris more time. However it turned out, or whoever the Democratic Party chose or people voted for, perhaps that would have given them more than 107 days, which is all she had to introduce herself as a candidate at the top of the ticket.
There's certainly going to be a lot of discussions and deep soul searching, I think, within the Democratic Party about how this all unfolded, and a lot of deep questions for the president about the way he went out of this race, the timing of this. Could the outcome have been different if Democrats had had time for a primary, for instance? But Kamala Harris, in those 107 days, really cast herself as the change candidate. That is hard to do when you are the sitting vice president. And when you look back at how things could have been different, I think we have been discussing this all night long and into the wee hours here. The fact that she wasn't able to really differentiate herself enough from the president to say to Americans who are suffering economically that what she would do differently, and to really put a fine point on that, I think it is going to go down as one of the biggest errors in this campaign.
And will define the Biden presidency to a large part. Yes. And President Biden, for the longest time, thought he was best positioned to keep Donald Trump returning to the White House. That's a calculation they'll all have to look back on. Lindsay Davis, I want to bring you in here on the projection, the official projection, Donald Trump returning to the White House. You've been looking at the exit polls, and what Donald Trump did tonight was increase his margins in some of the areas where he won before before by substantial margins. You know, almost every one of these red counties showed that he was gaining. And not only did he do that, but he peeled back some of the support in the urban areas, particularly from Latino voters. That was also something very telling tonight.
In virtually every metric, in virtually all of the things that we measure with regard to the exit polls, he increased his percentage from his points from 2020. And if you look at the top issues that people had, he's the one that they trusted. When you look at immigration, Donald Trump by far. There we go. I think it's coming up here. There you go. When you look at who do you trust to handle immigration? Donald Trump. Who do you trust to handle crime? Donald Trump. Who do you trust to handle the economy? Donald Trump. And so these were very significant issues that people said that when they were going to the polls today, that they felt were very important in their decision.
You know, we talked to Frank Luntz earlier for our special coverage here, Martha, of election night. He said he did last-minute focus groups. Many of them had favorable things to say about Kamala Harris in the focus groups, but they said they didn't know enough about her, didn't trust her on the key issues, and many of them didn't like Donald Trump, but still trusted him more on the economy and on border security.
And that's what I have found talking to voters over the last year and over the last few months when Kamala Harris has been in the race, that they didn't really know her. And say what you will about Donald Trump is authentic. And I think there was a little disconnect with Kamala Harris. He didn't know quite who she was. And when she started talking so much more about Donald Trump instead of herself, instead of her own plan, people just kept saying, I don't know exactly where she stands on this and the economy. I mean, they would just flat out say, my life was better with Donald Trump. I was listening to you say, we have never seen anything like it. We're all saying that. We said that almost every day when Donald Trump was president, and I'm sure we'll be saying it as we go ahead. But I want to say one thing. Donald Trump, in 2016, his inaugural speech, talking about division in the country. The Bible tells us how good and pleasant it is when God's people live together in unity. We must speak our minds openly, debate our disagreements honestly, but always pursue solidarity. When America is united, America is totally unstoppable. As we've all said tonight, that is going to be a very, very tall order.
A very tall order for the president as he enters his second term in the White House, though not consecutive, as we pointed out, part of the history of this night. Rachel Scott, he returns to the White House with considerable power, not only given the Supreme Court ruling on immunity that we've reported plenty on here, but also emboldened with a very good turnout for Republicans in the Senate. They were lifted by Donald Trump being at the top of the ticket. He's not only going to have a majority in the Senate, it looks like he's going to have a couple of seats that give him a majority. It's not a slim one, I should say.
Yes, that's exactly right, David. The former president will be returning back to the White House, back to Washington, and he will have a majority in the Senate. Of course, it is the Senate that confirms cabinet picks. This is what the former president is going to have before him. And by the way, several of the people that won tonight were people that former President Donald Trump endorsed in the primaries as well. David, this has been a remarkable campaign, unlike any other in American history. I've been covering Donald Trump now for 591 days since his very first rally of this campaign cycle in Waco, Texas. A twice impeached former president of the United States, who at one point during this campaign was spending more time in a courtroom than out on the campaign trail. He ran this race his own way. He didn't even participate in any of the primary debates. Republicans rallying behind the former president, and voters too. And all I can think about tonight is how the former president continued to start his rallies, asking his voters, his supporters, if they're better off now than they were 4 years ago. The question now for Donald Trump is how he's going to unite this nation.
Thank you, Rachel. And I guess as we always knew that half the country would not be happy with the result, the other half would be pleased, and both sort of portrayed it as a real threat to the country, the other side. But one of the things that I think that everyone can sort of agree on tonight, if we're looking for consensus for people at home, and this would take it back to Pierre and Aaron, because we had a fairly safe election day, actually election day that was quite safe, quite successful. There were a lot of safeguards in place, and we got through it just fine, Pierre.
Indeed, David. The key here there were some issues that popped up with bomb threats, but the American public resilient. They went out and voted. law enforcement said these were all hoaxes. Don't worry about it. Move ahead. But it was interesting that they did believe that in several states, including Wisconsin and Georgia, that Russia was involved in putting forth some of these hoax bomb threats.
But Pierre, David, this has to be a triumph of safety and security over deep skepticism about the integrity of the vote and a lot of disinformation.
And David, I would add one thing. At the end of the day, as someone who grew up in a working class family, economics mean a lot to people. And I remember my mom often going to the grocery store and looking at the prices with a furrowed brow. At the end of the day, we don't elect saints. It's about the economy.
It always is, and we say that every time, and it's cliche for a reason because it's true. Pierre Thomas, thanks. I'll give you the final word there. Thanks to everybody. I mean, you've been just incredible. Brooke Klein, we can't even believe you're still standing. You've been punching the numbers all night. We really do appreciate it. And to Rachel and Mary, who've been on this campaign trail for the better part of a couple of years, we're really grateful. And to all of you here with us here at the desk, thank you. Thank you. Vice President Kamala Harris expected to speak later today. ABC News will carry that live when it happens. Our coverage of the 2024 election will continue. For many of you, we return you to regular programming. Your local news has started here in much of the East. And of course, Robin, George, and Michael are coming up a short time from now on Good Morning America. And I'll see you a little later today for World News Tonight. I'm David Muir, New York. From all of us here at ABC News, thanks for being with us for almost 12 hours of election coverage. We'll see you later today. Good day.